Texas or was it Canada? Drinking whiskey in the morning light, and I work the stage on.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Bell with Bobby Blaze. This is episode number 18, Top 10 Most Underrated Wrestlers. I am your host and stay-at-home space Viking, Jeremy Vilmur, and now the star of the show, Bobby Blaze.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to be here, man. I'm really looking forward to this episode of the most underrated wrestlers of all time. And who were you? What was that? Viking? Stay-at-home?
Stay-at-home space Viking.
I like it.
Me
like
too.
it, man. Yeah, that's pretty cool gimmick there, man.
I'm letting my
Can't wait
beard
to see the outfit.
Yeah, I'm letting my beard get all big and bushy right now.
Oh, God, how you stand that, man?
You scratch a lot is what you do.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad to be here, man. I'm glad the episodes have been doing really, really good. Appreciate all the fans out there. I do have a couple of shout-outs, if that's okay.
Yes, please do.
I'd like to give a shout-out to the Rob and Slim Show. They had me on as a guest here the last couple of weeks. I was here live last week, and they've rebroadcasted a couple of times. So shout-out to the Rob and Slim Show, and also to the Wrestling Scope. They sent us some information about this week's venue, where we come from, Wrestling at the Chase. We're going to come to you from St. Louis this week. We're going to talk a little bit about KPLP Channel 11 there in St. Louis and some of the wrestling. We're not going to great detail about it, but we kind of give some people the history of the venues and things. They sent us a little documentary from about 1999. It's on YouTube still, about the history of the Wrestling at the Chase. So that's interesting. So, yeah, shout out to Rob and Slim Show, and also to the Wrestling Scope. And that's what I've got this. And also glad that hopefully all the people are now getting some power restored down there in the Carolinas. So, yeah, hopefully that's coming along with some of the other stuff that's going on in the world. Hopefully things are looking brighter for everyone nowadays.
Yeah, I
That's
noticed.
nice.
I did notice that Tex isn't lugging around that inflatable raft he had last week at Bell to Bell Towers. So I'm thinking things must be better.
Yeah. He fit right into that boiler room. I noticed that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this week we are coming to you from the Chase in St. Louis, Missouri. Bobby, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, the thing is, I don't know a whole lot about it other than I can sit there and read to you off of Wikipedia or something like that. But here's the thing, I'm going to go by just a little bit of things that I do know. As I mentioned, the TV was KPLP 11 was a TV channel. They had spectacular ratings. I know that. And I know it was, of course, we're talking about promoter Sam Mushnick. Mushnick, I guess is how you would say it. But they all talked about all the wrestlers on a documentary I watched, and some of the notes that I have, some of the things that he was a great promoter, very honest man. But the thing about it was, like, they had a Harley Race on there, and some of the people from the documentary, and I had read this, of course, and then I'm going to go into a little personal story. But there at the Wrestling at the Chase, it held about 900 people, and Harley Race talked about it more than anyone, as far as, now the commentator did too, but the dressing, there's people that are really dressed up. They went in tuxedos, and they went out in, really formal dress wear, and they're sitting there eating and drinking champagne and watching professional wrestling. And it was just one of those things that, you unheard of nowadays, people getting dressed up nice to go to a wrestling show. And so they put it all together. The one thing that I do know is on the documentary, Ron Starr was on it. And early in my career, Ron Starr helped me out quite a bit. And he had literally traveled all over the world. In fact, I was in Canada with him, as well as over in South Africa. And I don't think I've seen him other than one time in Atlanta in the United States when he was still living. But here's the thing. He was always talking about these territories. I told you about Portland. He told me the Piper story, and he was telling me about St. Louis, and I didn't understand at that time, that St. Louis was a wrestling capital of the world, because I never watched it when I was younger from that area. We never got that back in the regionalized TV, television. But Ron was always talking about what a great territory it was to work, and of course I've heard it from the other boys. But Ron kind of opened up about it. And it also had the NWA credibility. Lou Thez helped, from my understanding, get the tie-in with Mushnick and the hotel there when they become affiliated with the NWA. I think it was originally the St. Louis Wrestling Club, and they may have had some different other people coming through. But once they put that Chase Park Hotel, that's where the wrestling from the Chase came from, was from that hotel. And of course they had the TV station there too. So it really worked out well. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it, is just that, anyone can go out there and fact check it and look it up. my thing is this: I really would have liked to have been able to see some of the video footage. They really showed a lot of matches on the documentary, but it's only 45 minutes long, so some of the matches were only 2 and 3 minutes. Seemed like anyone that was everyone ever in wrestling came through that area, the St. Louis area, and I would have liked to have wrestled there. I'd like to have went out. The closest I came to that, and this was no by any means wrestling at the Chase, when I was first breaking in at Malenko's, Dory Funk Jr., he didn't have his dojo then, and he ran a professional wrestling show, and he I guess Malenko had sent all of us up there. He what I want to say, subletted or whatever for a big convention in Ocala, Florida, where Dory Funk Jr. Resides at, and he had a big show for a bunch of horse trainers, farmers, what do you want to call them, horse racers. It was a big deal, man. And everyone came. It was in a big ballroom, and it was a really first-class deal. And Dory had several, other guys besides Malenko's guys there. But it was one of those times that I recall in my career where I actually wrestled in front of a crowd that was sitting there in dresses, tuxedos, dressed up, I should say, not in dresses, but dressed up, the females, gowns and ballroom attire, if you will, eating a meal. And it was a big horse, I want to say like a horse convention in Ocala, Florida, maybe horse breeders. That might be the best way or horse sales. But anyway, it was a big ado. And that's about the closest I come to wrestling. Most of the people I wrestle in front of what the kind of fans you see today, just people in T-shirts and girls even just in T-shirts or as we, know, during the regional days, maybe less than a T-shirt, a little bit more revealing. But anyway, yeah, so that's all I was going to say about the Wrestling from the Scope. Anyone can check that out. And or Wrestling from the Chase, wrestling there in St. Louis, Missouri. So
yeah, Sam Muchnick was a president of the St. Louis, what do they call it, wrestling club.
Yes.
He was also the NWA president from 1950 to 1960 and from 1963 to 1975. Really, the establishing days of the NWA were pretty much guided by Sam Muchnick. So it's a big deal.
So home of the NWA pretty much, right?
Pretty much,
St. Louis
yeah.
area?
I mean, it's, if the president, because the NWA was founded in 48, he took over as president in 50, I would say that wherever he was, the NWA was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that special, from what I've seen, and just from us being fans, we know, like I said, anyone that was anyone came through there, because on that tape, man, they had, obviously Harley Race and Flair and all those NWA greats, came through there. Dory Jr., as I mentioned, it was phenomenal talent that came through there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and apparently the WWE's first match with Hulk Hogan that Gene Okerlund was the announcer for was at the Chase.
I kind of thought that was funny because I think, I could be wrong on this particular one, but Harley Race was running still over in there when the WWF first came, and I guess he was at another venue across the river. I don't know if it was Kansas City, St. Louis, in that area, but one of those areas before Race went to the WWE, eventually, or WWF. He approached him. He come into the locker room. They all knew him in the building, of course, and everyone thought he was going to slap the shit out of Hogan or something. There's a story to that. Someone wanted to shoot interviews by Harley about one of his first run-ins with Hogan early on when WWF back in the day tried to run the St. Louis area. And again, that could be the Kansas City area, but nonetheless, there's a story out there. Check it out, and I find it really interesting, those behind-the-scenes things when before Vince actually did take over everything. There's still those little, and NWA was strong, and I guess Harley was still, he had a big investment out there, from what he said on the video. So it's pretty interesting, but you all can fact check all that stuff. With that said, Jeremy, unless you have anything more to add about wrestling at the Chase, let's move on if you don't care.
Yeah, let's go ahead and,
Okay.
I do want to say one thing real quick.
Yeah, please do.
They have announced Cody Rhodes' first opponent for the NWA title.
Oh, yeah?
And it's Willie Mack, who wrestles for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. He's actually their champion in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. I believe he also wrestles in Lucha Underground. It's going to be on an ROH show, so the NWA champion will be facing a opponent from outside of the home venue's promotion's own promotion. Will be facing a wrestler from outside the company. Okay. For the NWA title, and I think that's starting to feel a little bit like the old territory days, isn't it?
That's what I was going to ask you. Is this, I think you called this, and I hope it holds true. Are you talking about a traveling championship belt that goes from territory to territory? Even though there's not a territory per se right in there, they're starting to work at these venues with other companies. So that, from what I understand, you're telling me we'll have a traveling title with the champ, right?
That's the way it's looking to me. And I guess,
oh man, let's keep our fingers crossed, wrestling fans.
And I guess they're about to drop the new NWA national title pretty soon, with plans to do a women's title and a tag title not too distant in the future as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that update, man. I appreciate that. That's awesome.
I just wanted to get that out there to everybody, because I haven't been excited about wrestling in a long time, and now I am.
Yeah, right on, man. That's good. It's good. It's good to be a fan.
It is.
Sometimes we peak and we valley in those things as wrestling fans, but man, when something good's happening, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, it works in cycles. It seems like that cycle is coming back around for professional wrestling, man. Yep. And that's sort of upswing. I like that. So
yeah, me too. I'm really excited about that. All right. With that said, let's move on to the top 10 underrated wrestlers.
Yes. With that said, I want to say this. We have respect for all these guys on our list. I wanted to make sure we was heading in the right direction with our list. So when we first started off, we get about, 15, 18, 20 people. We do a process of elimination, Jeremy and myself. So just so people know, we know there's not just our 10, and our 10 doesn't have to be the correct 10. So with that said, always there's some people that don't make the list and of our top 10. But it's because we said, well, we'll go this way. We'll choose a regional person. Well, obviously all of these guys are, a lot of these guys are national, international. Let me take that back. But on some of these guys, anyway, with that said, here's a couple of mine that I had from the fan back on the hashtag BBBB on our Bell to Bell Blaze Twitter feed, and that was I had a lot of people wrote me about. Almost everyone had several of mine on their list, one combination or another. But there was made mention of Buddy Rose. They thought he was underrated, and I can agree with that. He was that lean, mean 217. That's, of course, when he got up there to doing the TV for New York. Yep. But also another one I really thought had all the talent in the world, and then he just kind of, I don't know what he did. He just kind of kept ballooning up in his weight, and that was Adrian Adonis. And I don't know, if he had some health issues or what happened on that, or if he just couldn't take care of himself, because at one time, he was a legitimate tough guy, and he had a great look about him, and he was on his own for a while. Then, of course, he tagged with Jesse the Body Ventura and those things, and he had that damn tough look to him, man. And, of course, the character went a different direction eventually, but he was always underrated as far as I was concerned, as far as one of the guys that, that still got a good push, and they worked in those territories, and they went to New York and done pretty good, but still we're just kind of heading that direction. That's just kind of letting people know where some of our thoughts came from of guys that we thought, were underrated. And I think you might have one or two on there, too. Oh, yeah.
Well, and this one's because our buddy Tex just went through some rough times, and he's always putting a guy out there that doesn't make the cut or we forget or whatever. But the Mass Superstar is somebody that doesn't get talked about a whole lot that we'll have to revisit and come back to.
And we will.
Yeah. And so he would be on my list, and also, of course, you won't let me put him on this episode because I put him in every episode. But Tully Blanchard and Rick Rude didn't make the cut either, so I am a little heartbroken today, but I'll get by.
Yeah, you'll make it, because they'll make every other damn list. And I'm usually right there with you.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Mass Superstar, what a tremendous talent he was. He had a really good interview. He is one of the really big men. He could really move for a big man. Of course, he was trained by Malenko, and at one time he was actually managed by Malenko. And I saw him, I worked with him up in West Virginia several I don't know, maybe a year ago, we'll say. I couldn't even tell you. And then I saw him back in May at the retirement show I was at. And I got some pictures somewhere I'll try to dig out if Demo Man out there, if he'll ever send them to me. But I've got some pictures with him. Super nice guy for a superstar, But he is always one of those guys that just, like you said, underrated. But anyway, with that said, do you have any more that people sent in? Because there was a lot that people sent in, but some of them was already on our list, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, the listeners threw a lot of names at us. Here's kind of the nice thing is, 5, 6, 7 months from now, we can do 10 more underrated wrestlers and come back and revisit other people. That's kind of the nice thing about doing the list is there's always a way to expand on it or come back and take another bite at the apple. So if your suggestions didn't make it this time, I'm sure they're going to be in an episode in the future. Just keep reminding us. And Bobby, before we get started, why don't you throw out all our Twitter handles to everybody so people know where to find us?
Okay, you can find Jeremy at the Geekish Cast on Twitter. You can find me at Bobby Blaze 744 on Twitter, and we have a joint account, and it's Bell to Bell Blaze, and that's on Twitter, and that's our joint one. And usually, if Jeremy, I noticed that if he sends an answer to the question, he'll sign it Jeremy, and I'll sign it Bobby. So you'll know which one you're talking to, but a lot of times we share those on either Jeremy's The Geekish Cast or mine at Bobby Blaze 744. We try to use the hashtag BBBB, but if you don't, that's okay. If it gets to us, we'll see it, one way or the other. Just, let us know that, we've got Jeremy's actually one. Let me take my hat off to him and tip my hat to him, one or the other, or both. I'll just take it off and tip it over. I don't know. No. But, he's got over 1,100 people. Just, that's a grassroots, podcast. It's a grassroots page, and that's all, just, good wrestling fans following us, and we appreciate it, man. And we do appreciate your feedback, and we do take, listener suggestion. We've done a couple programs where people's written us at the Geekish Cast or written us at Bobby Blaze 744 or on the Bell to Bell Blaze podcast Twitter page there, and we've taken our ideas for some different suggestions. So please feel free to interact with us. And as Jeremy said earlier, if your guy, your man, your most favorite professional wrestler that you thought was underrated doesn't make this list, and again, this is episode 18 of the Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze podcast. If your guy doesn't make it for the most underrated wrestler, there's a chance we'll do another list in the future. Who knows? It could be 6 months or a year from now, but hopefully we're still doing good business by then, and we'll get back to some of these guys. With that said, Jeremy, let's start off with all due respect to all these guys we're about to mention, let's start off with the top 10 most underrated professional wrestlers of all times on the Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze podcast.
All right. Well, with number 10, I'm going to come in with Mike Awesome.
I think that's a great entry for number 10.
Yeah, Mike was 6'6", 292 pounds. He moved like a luchador. The guy dove and a high flyer. He was pretty incredible to watch. And the thing is, you often forget about his Japan days or his early ECW days, and the guy, for such a big man, could move.
Yeah.
It was really something to see, and it gets overlooked, gets forgotten about.
Yeah.
He was a multiple FMW champion, from brass knuckles to six-man tag to independent champion. He worked all over Japan. Did you know, and I didn't know this, that when he joined WCW, he was still ECW champion?
I was there, actually.
Oh, so, you were? That's right.
Yeah. Yep. No, I didn't realize he was still champion until, you're back then I was traveling so much with him, this and that, and I have a couple of things to add about Mike. But yeah, I didn't even pay fucking attention to those titles and stuff. Honestly, I hate to tell you that, but I didn't. So, until a couple of years later, when just things start popping up and this comes up and, all that, I didn't know that, and you just now reminded me of that fact, Yeah. But yeah, I was there here's the thing remember about Mike. First of all, Mike was a super good, nice guy to me. For whatever reason, he and I was training. We had different people down in Florida. He was training with Steve Kearns and the people over there at the Championship Wrestling. And I was at the Eddie Graham Sports Complex on Sundays, and I wasn't on the shows then, but I was going to them every Sunday at the time, right outside Orlando. And I saw this big, strong guy, man, and he was working some of those shows, but I could see how raw he was because I was training. And we'll say a few months went by when I actually moved down to Tampa. And again, I'd see him on at the Sportatorium there, and I thought, man, this guy's just got a lot of raw ability. And one day he come over to him, and I always spoke to him, just the boys being courteous to each other, kind of thing. But one day he come over to Malenko's, and he actually, got in a ring, and man, I showed him like a top wrist lock and how to turn it to a hammer lock, just little things. Again, very professional, super nice guy, just a big old strong guy. And we always just took a liking to each other and wished each other well. Of course, I kind of followed his career, knowing the FMW days and all those type things, and ECW, et cetera. And I didn't see him again for many years until he showed up at WCW. And he was there. At that time, I was slacking off, and he was coming on because my travel schedule with them, my contract was getting ready to end when he was coming in. And he would Horace Boulder, Hogan's nephew, they were really good friends.
They were cousins.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was uncle nephew, right? If I'm not mistaken. And anyway, Horace was always good to me as well. And several times I found myself standing in the back before Mike was getting his push in ECW or WCW there. And I knew them both from Tampa. And a lot of times we just stand around talking and bullshit. We honestly talked about baseball in Japan quite a bit, and baseball in Japan for that matter. So, number two, but I always did think, what a big, strong guy, good look to him. He could work. He could, do the dives like you said, and nothing but respect for him. But I always thought he was underrated, and putting him at number 10 with the list we've compiled today, I think that's a great place for Mike. So, hats off to Mike Awesome. May he rest in peace. Hopefully he's in a, better place than where he ended up at here. But man, he was just a super great guy, man. I really liked Mike a lot.
Yeah. Apparently, cause I just discovered the thing about him being, distantly related to the Boulders, Bolias, Hogans. He always suspected that his Fat Lady Thriller and that 70s guy booking was maybe because he was related to the Hogans after the fallout between Vince Russo and Hogan.
That could very well be.
Yeah.
Because I know he didn't come in that way.
No, and hurt feelings run deep,
Yeah.
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 So, Mike Awesome comes in at number 10, and I think he is a great spot.
I do too. What, he opened up the show with it.
Yeah.
Coming in at number 9, Dustin Rhodes.
Okay, so I know he's over his Goldust. I know he's been over his Goldust. We're talking about Dusty Rhodes' son here. Surely there was a way to have Dusty Rhodes Jr., Dustin Rhodes, get over without being a camp gay, gold-painted, gorgeous George, Adrian Street ripoff, right?
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I saw him at Championship Wrestling Florida once again, right around the same time period, training down there and going to the shows on Tuesday. I'd already moved down to Tampa at that point from Orlando, and I'd see Dusty just about every Tuesday. He was booked. If he wasn't, it was every other Tuesday. Tall, lanky back then, but he had that look. His promos weren't the greatest back then, but it didn't have to be at that point because look who your dad is. And that's not a dig towards Dustin at any point. Am I making that dig? I'm just saying I just saw a lot of raw and a lot of natural talent and ability. And again, if he had a weakness back then, his interviews, but look who he's following, And they had guys like Coach and DDP and Buddy Colt and those guys doing the announcing down there. So I mean, they had good people, working with them and things. So Dustin, but now it's been about 3 years. I went to a WWE show and I went in a back up in Charleston and I of all the people, Scotty Armstrong and Charles Robinson were the ones that were my connections. And I don't throw those connections around loosely. I don't just get anyone tickets or anything. And I don't take advantage of the guys when they come to the area because I know they got a job to do. But Charles told me, he said, Bobby, you're not going to hardly know anyone on this card tonight. And it ended up, the only people I actually knew very well was Kane. And of course, I'd been in Smoky Mountain with him and knew him when he was first breaking in. But Dustin was the other one. He said, Dustin will be out in a minute. He's back there eating. And of course, Dustin and I sit there and spoke for probably 15, 20 minutes or whatever. But I agree with you. As Dustin Rhodes, man, he just never got that push. But man, I mean, I know Goldust got over. I understand that. But you're thinking you're the son of Dusty Rhodes. We've done a whole special on him. Go back to episode 4 of the Bell to Bell Bobby Blaze podcast. This is our most popular fucking episode out there, man, with a lot of listens on it. But Dustin, just a very talented guy, good body, could talk, do whatever, just underrated as Dustin Rhodes.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these guys, we're not going to know why they never really got over in a way that seemed to fit them. So Dustin Rhodes is just a mystery to me. But again, he did really get over his Goldust. It seems kind of I don't know.
I just thought when you said that, I agree. He was on Howard Stone. He was doing that barking gimmick. But that's Goldust. You got shocked or something. But it's like, you're thinking, like you said earlier, that's Dusty Rhodes' son. You would think, how did he not get over as, you just go for a different direction. Who knows? With that said, we're going to go into number 8, and I think we do know some of the reasons why this person, wasn't as over as he could have been or as underrated as we have him on our list. And my heart goes out to this guy because I knew him very, very, very well. And if you do any fact checking at all, I'm not going to say I know Jeremy's not the kind of person either. We're not going to say anything about this next person that he hasn't already said about himself. But he's none other than the nature boy, Buddy Landell. What a great talent Buddy Landell was.
He was
but
great,
underrated.
Yeah, great talker, great worker, but, kind of like you were intimating there, he really was a self-inflicted gunshot wound of losing push.
Yeah.
He was booked to win the title at one point and blew that off. It's a shame. It's sad to see people in this position because he's one of those guys who could have really, really been big. Hell, was big. I say really what it was big. It just he had shit in his way, and it's unfortunate. And it's kind of, he's one of those guys, and we'll get to another one later. Like musicians love bands like Rush and Kansas and Dream Theater, and they're really bands for musicians. Buddy Landel is one of those wrestlers. Yeah. People in the business and people who like me kind of, try to dig in as much as we can, but aren't in the business. Guys like Buddy Landel stand out because he's one of those little hidden gems, Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I could tell you so many Buddy Landel stories, but I won't go into, a lot of them. I wrote about him in both of my books, and there's a cheap plug for Pin Me, Pay Me, and also I kicked that on too.
Available at tinyurl.com/blazebook1 and tinyurl.com/blazebook2.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Thank you. See, with that said, Buddy, that was one of the matches I spoke about last week. I was in the ring with him and hadn't been properly trained all the way, and he put me in a ring. The promoter did with him and against Hector Guerrero and Boogie Woogie Man Handsome Jimmy Valiant. And Buddy and I went out there, and that was the first time I met him. And then after I took off to Florida, because I got kind of smartened up, and I took off to Florida. But I had always been a Buddy Landel fan. I was catching the tail. Of course, I saw him in Memphis some, but I was catching the tail end. You and I was talking off air on Continental at the time. And then several years later, I got to work with Buddy at Smoky Mountain. And I was always one of his fans, And Buddy and I to some degree, was a little bit alike. But I always had respect for Buddy, and I think Buddy always had respect for me. One of the funniest stories I can tell you, and I'll just do this real briefly, because I don't want anyone to take anything. Think I'm speaking ill of the dead. Rest in peace, Buddy. But we had our ups and downs, and we always worked through them. One day after my book came out, and I wrote something very nice about him in Pin Me, Pay Me, about the title run, and I just told the truth, and that's straight shoot. I just wrote it like it happened. And Buddy had written me a letter, and went through social media, let's just say that. And we had corresponded. And also, Buddy had been trained early on by the great Malenko back in the day. He was living with, I think Bob Orton Jr. was dating Buddy's sister. There's a whole story there. But anyway, so Dean Malenko knew that I wrestled with Buddy, and he asked how he was doing. I mean, it's way back when. So fast forward to a few years ago, and Buddy's, I sent him a little clip of what I was going to put in the book about him, and he liked it. And then when the book came, I sent it to him. He wrote me a really, really nice letter, and he said, "I love it. I friggin' love it." And depending on when you got a hold of Buddy, if he was using the F word or friggin', but yeah, he was in one of them things. So what happened was, the funniest thing I'll tell you real quickly is, he wrote me this really, really nice letter, and me being a smart ass that I am, I said, "Thanks. It's so kind." And I said, "Buddy, thanks. Those words mean so much more to me." I was a little bit depressed at the time, but I try to stay upbeat. But I was like, and so Buddy says, we're writing back and forth over a couple-week period. And he says, even Joe Malenko got involved in part of the conversation. But then Buddy writes me a thing and says, "God always blessed me by putting me in a ring with such top talent as yourself, Bobby," something along those lines. And, of course, Buddy is real sensitive to the God issue. And if anyone is, I'm not meaning to offend anyone, but I'm just going to tell. I said, "So God put you in there for a lot of talented people like myself." And I sat there, I said, okay. I know this is Buddy, so what the fuck. I said, "Yeah, Buddy, that's great." I said, "My problem is this." I said, "I thought Jim Cornette put you in there with me. He's a fucking booker." Buddy immediately come back with some heat. I come back with some heat, and I'm like, "Fuck you if you can't take a joke." And we was right back to where we used to be at. So I just said, he said, "God always put him with the best talent," which I took as a great compliment. I said, "Yeah, well, I thought it was Jim Cornette, but whatever." Yeah. So that's my last little Buddy Landel story that I'll tell you, because you can read about some of them in the books like we already plugged. But Buddy was one of those guys, like you said, just a tremendous talent that was underrated, but pretty much by his own demons and his own admissions.
Oh, yeah. I did find out that Buddy, I don't know which governor did it, but he was declared the most influential wrestler from Kentucky by governor decree. You're in Kentucky. You're in Kentucky, aren't you?
Fuck you, buddy. God damn it, still getting over on me. I'd like to know which governor it was. Jim Cornette's from here. Fucking Muhammad Ali's from here. George Clooney's from here. Fucking, for Christ's sakes, Billy Ray Cyrus and Bobby Blaze are from fucking Kentucky. What the fuck? Buddy's from Tennessee. I'd like to know what governor that was.
Yeah, we'll look into it more at a later date.
No, I love Buddy and I miss him, but hey, it's just one of those things, and he was underrated. He comes in at number 8 on our list of the most underrated wrestlers of all time. Rest in peace, Buddy.
That's right. And number 7. This one might be kind of controversial with some people. It's Sean Waltman, X-Pac 6, 123 Kid. Call him what you will. We'll just call him Sean for now. Okay, so there's a thing called X-Pac heat. I know about it. I've heard about it. But what people forget about Sean is he was a good fucking wrestler.
Yeah. We broke in together. He was one of the first people I met when I went to Malenko's. We actually roomed together on quite a few weekends. We traveled together, and we actually trained together my very first day until the last day. When he left, he moved to Minnesota at some point, and then I moved back to Kentucky. But I do think, and I'm not going to say a whole lot of Sean stories. He and I still speak on a pretty regular basis via telephone and via text, not just social media. But I'm just going to say this, and I'll let Jeremy talk a little bit more about him. And that's Sean, to me, he was a tremendous talent. But even though he got over on different levels, I still think he was underrated. And so you go ahead and finish that out if you don't care. Because I don't mean any disrespect to Sean, but he definitely, to me, and we agreed upon it, he's on this list as controversial, but he was underrated.
Yeah, he was absolutely underrated. I think he gets a lot of blowback for being with the quote unquote clique. I think a lot of shit that should have splashed on all of them, all splashed on Sean, is what it seems like a lot of times when you talk to other fans. Like, they're cool with Nash and Hall, but they're kind of shitty towards Sean Waltman. This guy, he held the WCW Cruiserweight and WWF Light Heavyweight titles simultaneously. I did not know this.
Oh, I didn't either.
Yeah, I did not know that. I don't know how it worked out. I'm going to dig into that a little bit further because I'm always interested in double championships when they happen, what is seemingly by accident. That's also why I brought it up with Mike Awesome, because he was ECW champion at WCW and then turned around and lost it to Taz, who was working for the WWF at the time. That kind of stuff always just kind of torques my brain a little bit. So I'm going to dig, I'm going to dig into it. Yeah, Sean was a hell of a worker. Whatever was going on between him and the crowd, I think just gets in the way of people seeing it. So he's definitely underrated. He moved fast. That leg drop that he used looked like it hurt like a son of a bitch. And I think leg drops are stupid, Yeah. He could talk shit. He could get heat, sometimes the wrong kind of heat. I'm going to say that X-Pac, Sean Waltman, number 7, definitely underrated as a wrestler.
Right on. Yeah, I agree with you on that. So with that said, let's go to number 6, a good friend of mine. From the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton. Bobby, to me, has always been one of the most underrated guys ever. That guy could work his ass off. He like 5 foot fuck all. I don't even know, he's like 5'7" to 5'9" maybe. Man, the stuff he done, and he started off, at a young age of 17, and he worked all over the world, literally all over the world. He's a really, really super good, nice guy. We used to call him Captain Nervous. JYD used to call him Captain Nervous on the shows he used to promote. He helped me get one of my first, pretty much put me in contact with Cornette after I had made contact, and his late partner, Tommy Rogers, who's again another, underrated guy back in the day. Yep. But Tommy helped me with Cornette, and then Bobby kind of was in between because I worked on Bobby's shows, and Bobby gave Jim the word, hey, hire this guy if you get a chance, or at least give him a tryout, because Jim's going to do what he's going to do, and he ended up hiring me. But Bobby, man, the Fantastics, they were over everywhere they went. They could work their ass off, do just about anything you want them to do in the ring. And they drew tremendous money out there in Mid-South. They drew money out there in Dallas. And then, of course, they was huge in Japan for that Japanese style. Have seen tapes, and I think it was about 2 years ago, because I didn't know this took place, and I found it, and I watched it. And I was actually going to be seeing Bobby that following weekend. I just sent out a text. We was actually going to travel together. And I watched the Malenko's against the Fantastics in Japan, and it was fucking awesome. I didn't even know it existed. And that's been a couple years ago. I think we was heading to a show in Madison, West Virginia, which I'll be talking about in the future here coming up. But Bobby was like, he texted me immediately back, I can't believe you found that. And I'm like, yeah, man, it was just, and I complimented him, and as the boys do sometimes. And Bobby's just a fucking underrated wrestler. He could have easily been in the top 5 once we do get into our top 5, but I'm going to let you finish out that he's number 6 is Bobby Fulton.
Apparently, I went and, through YouTube looking for just different matches of his, as part of the Fantastics up to more recently. Because Bobby Fulton just retired from in-ring work.
Yes. Back in May.
Yeah, just a couple months ago.
Right.
One thing I did notice, I didn't count them, but I kept seeing that the Fantastics were in a lot of scaffold matches to the point where I think Bobby Fulton spent more time on a scaffold than a house painter.
Well, Bobby Fulton also, on his shows, was the king of the gimmick matches, something we talked a little bit about last week in the Blindfold Battle Royals.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could see that, him being in this. I could see him voluntarily saying, y'all, I'll be in it, and what can I do? What can we do for this next angle? Oh, a scaffold, that sounds good.
Yeah. So I didn't know Bobby Fulton real well, so what I do know about him is stuff I picked up from other podcasts and then going back and, reading bits or trying to find matches on YouTube. That's one thing I can say you can pick up about him right off the bat. This guy works in his sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, we was in Columbus one time. He used to do a show. It was an outdoor show. It was in this neighborhood, less desirable neighborhood, but the businessmen there would pitch in and they do a wrestling show as part of this little carnival out in Columbus, Ohio. And man, one that has every late July, early August. And they ran it every year, and Bobby, he had it, the Big Time Pro Wrestling production. And, man, we were out there first match. Bobby used to do his thing. He did a lot like Dallas. And Rip Rogers wanted to smarten me up to it. That's where Bobby got the idea. He'd run a smaller card, so the first match would be a tag team match, a singles match, and then the babyface would get cheated by the heel, which would be me. And then that would lead to what's called a captain's match. And then we'd have, 2 matches, then a gimmick match. And then he'd have, like I said, JYD or Ron Garvin or someone would come in. And then it would be Bobby and whoever the other babyface was, and it would be me as the heel with whatever heel it was. So the captain's match, the first match always set up the captain's match. Mm-hmm. And so he did that in Dallas with small crews of 8 and 10 guys and a referee, So Rip was one to say, hey, Bobby got that from down there in Dallas. That's why he runs these shows with just 8 of us, And we was always appreciative of work because I was one of the 8. But anyway, we was out there. It's fucking 100 degrees, man. And we're out there, and at that time I weighed about 225, 230. I wasn't overly heavy, but I was, starting to get a little bit heavy. Bobby's out there. He's probably 200, but he's starting to get a little bit heavier. We're close to the same age, give or take a couple of years. And there's a couple of young guys sweating balls back there in the tent. And one of my brothers had went to the show. And he said, look out, we went 20 minutes. We was going to do that, straight through 20-minute thing for the captain's match. And the guy said to my brother, so look at them fat fuckers out there. He said, it's 100 degrees out there and they're fucking working for 20 minutes. And I'm sitting over, I got 7% body fat and I'm blowing up after 2 or 3 minutes in the match, And so my brother told me at intermission, so I went back and this guy, I won't mention a wrestler. So anyway, I know him. I haven't seen him for quite a while. He's a good guy, but I walked up to him after intermission. I said, hey. And he said, yeah. I said, you know what that is? I said, that's fucking called working. Learn it. And he goes, huh? And I go, I don't care if you got 7% fat or not. I said, it doesn't fucking matter. I said, it's called working. The only reason Bobby and I even broke a sweat was because it's fucking hot out. We was just in the ring working, and we worked our ass off. He has a baby suplex, and I'd pick him up and give him a big-ass fucking suplex. He'd give me yo Iggy, like, oh, fuck, So, and Bobby's a pretty straightforward guy, he wouldn't cuss at you, but he'd give you that look like,
Yeah.
So, but I always liked Bobby. In fact, I love Bobby. He's one of the guys that when I see him or I talk to him on the phone, I always tell him because our business is, forever changing and we're losing guys in this business. I always make sure I tell Bobby Fulton I love him. So, and he always tells me that back and I know he means it. So, number 6 there, Bobby Fulton. So with that said, let's go into our top 5, Jeremy, on episode 18 of the Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze podcast, the most underrated wrestler of all time. And coming at number 5 is who?
Barry Windham.
Big BW.
God damn. So I became aware of Barry, I don't know, right around the time that he was, I don't know, it would have been a little bit before he got into the Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
And I remember the first thing I saw him do, and it might have been the first time I saw anybody do it. He was suplexing guys off the 3rd turnbuckle. And I think they called it the Widowmaker, or they called him the Widowmaker. I can't remember, but I know that word was used in conjunction. And I watched that and I almost shit my pants with just like, he's gonna kill this guy. I don't know how you get up from this move. I don't know how the guy giving this move gets up from this move.
I think that, what you're saying is absolutely 100% straight shooting. And that guy, to me, Barry just had it all, man. And he would put you on that rope the way he did it. He would put the guy on the top rope. I think Bob Orton Jr. had done that superplex and it was on the second rope. But the way Barry done it, I think the guy actually stepped all the way up to that top rope as he was bringing him over. And Barry's like 6'6", man, you know.
Yeah,
and
he's a big
once
man.
he started filling out too, he was just, like you said, a big man. That's exactly what I was going to say. And I always thought, and I know we're going to get controversy on this, and that's fine, because some people have already mentioned this in one of our earlier podcasts when we done our greatest rivalries and things. And that's when, the Four Horsemen, that to me, when Barry was a part of it, that to me was my favorite version of the Four Horsemen, if you will, when it's Flair and Anderson and Tully and Big BW back there, you know, and of course with JJ as the manager. But, man, I've heard so many times, just, you know, of course, you and I, we say it all the time. We're fans, and I watch stuff, a lot of stuff that I watch and listen to interviews. I was listening to Wrestling Memories a few years ago, and one of the guests was JJ Dillon, and I thought it was great because he was talking about, you know, different people that went through the Horsemen. And he was really putting over Barry Windham as an individual. And then I watched some YouTube stuff, and Arn always puts over Barry. Flair always puts over Barry. Everyone puts over Barry, you know. And I don't know. I know he had, I guess, 80. If you watch some matches between probably 87 and 89, don't know he went to went to WWF at that time, but I know he was NWA still. I'm not sure when he went up there as the Widowmaker. But he went and came back or something like, anyway, around that time, maybe 86 through 89. Man, if you watch any Barry Windham matches, you will not see a bad match. He is just phenomenal. He could drop kick. He could suplex. Like I said, he started filling out at that point. Good psychology. Had that good look to him. And he worked as a face and as a heel. I think Flair might have turned on him there and they'd done some things together. And I remember Barry, like, you know, bleeding and get clothesline over the top rope, and just the bumps he was taking was fucking phenomenal. And I know we're sitting there talking about how over he was, but the bottom line was, I still think he was underrated. So I'll leave it at that, and you fellas in some more from your views of Barry.
Yeah, I kind of think Barry Windham was kind of a victim of timing more than anything else. Because, I mean, he won the NWA title, but the NWA title wasn't the NWA title anymore, you know?
Yeah, you've told me that before. I don't really, why don't you tell me a little bit about that if you don't care, if you have a minute?
He beat the Great Muta for the NWA title, at Super Brawl 3.
Okay.
And he was champion from 93 to 94. So, but it was the early 90s was a down time for wrestling. Not a lot of people were watching it. And by this point, you know, the NWA title was starting to not mean as much. So he was kind of out there. He missed, you know, his time in the Horsemen. He was in during a good time for wrestling, but he was the second guy to come in as the fourth guy in the Horsemen.
Right.
So he kind of missed out there, you know. Him and Mike Rotunda had a hell of a tag team.
Oh yeah.
But since the 80s, tag teams have been a spot of diminishing returns continuously.
Yeah.
You know, every 5 years, the tag team division becomes less and less meaningful, probably starting in 85 or 86. So, you know, yeah, he was in a big tag team run with Mike Rotunda, but, you know, it didn't really hit. I mean, I think they were champs in a couple different places too, but it was nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And then they take, you know, in the mid-90s, he rejoins the WWF and they give him some stupid gimmick as the Stalker.
Yeah, I remember something about they like hide behind a damn tree and camouflage or something.
Yeah.
It was brief. It's brief.
And they would say things like Barry Windham as the Stalker character, so they were kind of using him to blow up kayfabe a little. I don't know. That was just fucking weird.
Yeah. And, well, let's move on then. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
And then they put him in the new Blackjacks.
Oh, that's right.
With JBL, and it was a time period where I think the Roughhouse Cowboy well, first off, they did that at the WWF. And you know how the WWF feels about Southern gimmicks.
Yeah.
So
yeah, believe me, I do.
So to them, a cowboy gimmick is kind of a horseshit comedy spot anyways.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Blackjacks work in the 70s and early 80s. They don't really work in the late 90s. You know, nobody right now wants to be a cowboy when they grow up, or, you know what I mean? Not nobody, but that's not like being a gunslinger isn't something you're spending your life thinking about.
Right.
So, yeah, I think Barry Windham was just a victim of timing because he was a big, look, in Florida, he was over as fuck.
Oh, fuck, yes,
Yeah.
yes. We talked off earlier, but I went back, when I got down there to train, I went back and watched a lot of tapes and stuff, and now, of course, I went back again, as we've talked about off the air, we're such fans, you know. You read stuff, you all go look this up, and you watch some of the stuff. He was over huge in Florida.
Yeah.
You know, I was surprised. I tell you what, when I was at Kendall was over in Florida, like you wouldn't believe when I was down there. Yeah, it's just one of those things that I think you really the big broad picture once listening to you. And I forgot about that Blackjack, so I'm glad I let you finish that. That is, he might have just been a victim of timing, man. Everything was just, you know, some things happen to different people for different reasons. And it's not that Barry Windham didn't have the size, strength, talk, the talent, the look. He was just underrated, and maybe it all had to do with just the timing of every little gimmick that come along, or every little push he started to get, you know.
Yeah.
And we'll go into that in just a minute with someone else about soon they start getting a push, you know. Whatever happens, you know. But anyway, so I'm going to shut up about Barry unless you have anything else to say.
No, I could probably dig into this topic for 2 hours, so it's probably best we move on.
I know. We had an agreement today. We're going to try to stay within our time restraints, and we're going to try to do that. With that said, let's move on to number 4, and that's William Regal. Is that correct?
Or Sir William Regal, or
Sir William Regal, yes,
or Sir Stephen Regal. But not Mr. Electricity, Stephen Regal.
Right.
Yeah.
Shout out to our commissioner. We haven't heard from him for a while, but shout out to him.
Yeah.
But yes, William Regal or Steve Regal. What a tremendous talent. I just always think he's underrated.
He is underrated.
I always loved his work ability. It's incredible work ability. I know there's a story that I've probably shared it before, but him and Robbie Brookside got in the ring down at the power plant, and they went about 45 minutes, didn't speak, and people thought they were shooting, you know. And now I wasn't there, so just secondhand next day getting on a plane and people talking about it, you know, we got to the town. I said, yeah, them, because they're English. They fucking worked together since they was probably 14, 15 years old, you know.
Yeah.
And they can work. That's called working. Didn't mean to get excited there, but that's what it's called. It's called working. And William Regal could fucking work, man. He could wrestle, and he could shoot, and he could work. And I just always, no matter what it was Sir with the Blue Bloods and taking, you know, from that to with everyone he worked with, he always just had really, really good matches. Even the TV matches that he had, that were like, you know, you get a minute for your music, and 3 minutes of action. He would make those interesting, you know, at 3 minutes. Whether he went over or not, it didn't matter. He shined, man. He shined.
Well, he was a master of something that's hard to do. One of my favorite things about him was when he looked at the crowd or looked at other people, he looked at them in a way that said, you smell like shit. And it was clear on his face that he just, like, you were repugnant and you stunk and you needed to step back from him. Yep. And that is just a masterful thing. It's something that, okay, so I'm going to diverge for a second. Heels, or guys who want to be heels, you need to go watch William Regal as a heel.
Yes, absolutely.
If you're not getting over as a heel, it's because you haven't watched William Regal. The fucking audience hated him, and he hated them, and he made it clear. And that was perfect. He was a great technical wrestler. He was a master of the European uppercut, which is
I love that.
Yeah. A move that is severely overlooked. He's also a hell of a lot younger than you think he is.
Yep.
In the 90s, he was still, like, very young, and he's one of those guys who's like Arn Anderson. He's always looked 45. You know?
He did. He always did. I always thought he was older than what he was when I knew him. But, you know, he was a big fan, from my understanding, of the English comedy and the pantomime, if you will. And I can go off and I can be Bobby the Anti-Mind Blaze all of a sudden, but I won't today because we're really getting into this. Yeah, we're getting in this. We're getting into our time frame here. But William Regal, he has a book. I think it's called Walking the Golden Mile. and I read it a few years ago. It's a really good book, and it talks about his early days. It's not a WWF book, sponsored, actually his book, and it's called Walking the Golden Mile, if I'm not mistaken. But look it up. It's a really good wrestling book talking about behind the scenes, how he got started over in England, all through WCW. I'm not so sure that it goes into the WWF. It may, but it's a really good book. But Steve Regal, William Regal, Sir William Regal, whatever, what a tremendous talent he was or is in his professional wrestling business. Because if you catch one of his talks or his interviews, I think he's on Stone Cold. He's got a good Twitter. I think at Real World, I can't remember exactly what it is, but he's got some really good stuff out there that he puts out there, especially for young aspiring wrestlers. Anything he says, take it, listen to it, and run with it. And let me say this, man, you done brought it up. That European uppercut, I don't know that anyone done it any better. It was phenomenal. It really was.
Yeah, that was number 4, William Regal. And before we get into our top 3, I want to remind everybody, you can get Bobby's book, Pin Me, Pay Me, by going to tinyurl.com/blazebook1, and you get his other book, I Kicked Out on 2, The Education of a Wrestler, by going to tinyurl.com/blazebook2. It'll take you right to Amazon. I get a couple pennies for selling it to you, and Bobby gets a couple pennies for having written it. It's a great way for you to support the show and hear more of Bobby's stories. That being said, Bobby, let's go to our top 3, and why don't you tell us who number 3 is?
Yes, number 3, one of my all-time favorite people in the world of professional wrestling and all-time people in the world, and that's beautiful Bobby Eaton. Man, was he underrated or what? Because he is fucking talent.
Bobby Eaton is one of those guys, like I was saying how musicians love bands like Rush and Dream Theater. Bobby Eaton is a wrestler's wrestler. Fans appreciate him, wrestlers appreciate him, and most people forget about him who aren't like day in, day out 100% wrestling fans. Every wrestler, manager, in-ring official that you hear talk about Bobby Eaton only has positive things to say about him.
I've said it before and I'll say it now. If you find me anyone in the wrestling business that ever had one thing bad to say about Bobby Eaton, I personally stick my size 13 shoe up their ass, because you won't. He is just such a complete fucking gentleman, a nice guy. I got the privilege of spending, I wrestled with him one of my earlier matches back. I'd met him years and years ago as a fan, when I was first breaking in. Then I got to wrestle with him in Smoky Mountain as one of the early opponents that Jim Cornette put me with. And how can you not get over when you're out there with Bobby Eaton working a fucking match, and all you got to do is shut up and listen, kid, because Bobby Eaton's a professional. And then I got to be with him in Vancouver. We were in EA Sports. We got to be on a video called Mayhem. It was EA Sports' first wrestling game they ever did. They, of course, they'd done a NASCAR and NCAA and the hockey and the soccer and all those, but they hadn't done wrestling yet. And while I was in WCW, I got to go up there and do the motion capture with them. And so Bobby Eaton, myself, Lasher Lou, and Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker, we spent about close to 30 days in Vancouver living in these big-ass townhouses. We all had our own town. EA Sports treated us very, very nice the whole time we was there. First class. Yeah, limos every morning. Hate to brag, man, but I was just telling someone, they picked you up at 8:30, and they brought you back at 5:30. You worked from 9 until 5 every day, and they had a, union up there, so we had to, go abide by their schedule. But, man, to spend those times with Bobby every evening, having dinner or having a couple cocktails or drink or what have you, and just talking to him. I mean, he was so nice to everyone, the limo, from the limo driver to the producers to all the ways. And I never forget Bobby. I asked him about that one time. I've asked him since then, and he's just so humble. But I said, Bobby, why are you so nice? How are you so nice to everyone? And this lesson stuck with me, and it has to this day. And we've got a couple inside jokes, and Bobby will say one to me, and I know exactly what he's going to go. As soon as I saw him in May, and I think I put that picture up there. But anyway, great guy. But when he told me, he said, "Well, Bobby, to me," he said, "it doesn't cost anything to be nice to someone." And I said, yeah. And he went in a little bit of detail about this, about like, when you think about it, it doesn't cost anything to be nice to anyone, to someone.
No.
And, that's just his attitude, man. He's just a great guy. And besides that, all the wrestlers loving him. his talent in the ring, man, that Alabama jammer, the knee, the leg, the stuff he done off the top rope. He was one of the first early flyers in the wrestling business. I even asked him about that, how that felt, you know, and he was like, oh, I just saw something, I tried, you know, and I've heard Cornette go off on him about, you know, like, you know, Bobby's just one of them guys, he could do this bump and do that bump, and if he saw something, I think I'll try this, he'd do it, you know. Just a talented guy. And I could go on and on, just like you could about Barry back there. I could go on and on about Bobby, but I'm gonna shut up about Bobby and just say, hey man, I love Bobby Eaton. What a great talent he was, but he's also one of the most underrated professional wrestlers of all time, in my opinion. That's why he comes to number 3 for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, he had the mightiest mullet ever, or some might call it a Kentucky waterfall.
Oh, God. Well, Ricky Morton's still sporting his mullet. He's proud of it. But Bobby Eaton also had the best punch in professional wrestling. So there you go. How about that?
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
what
right.
was that? Kentucky waterfall.
The Kentucky waterfall. Yeah. I went and looked up a list of other names for a mullet today just to find that one.
Okay. Well, I like that one.
Yeah.
Remind me to tell you about my mullet story. It happened to me in Sandusky, Ohio.
Okay.
When I was working for Cleveland All Pro. Remind me to tell you that story. But yeah, Bobby had a pretty damn good mullet back in the day. So with that said, let me say this. With Bobby coming in at number 3, these top 3 could have probably been interchangeable.
Oh, you could have put them in any
depending.
order. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to put that out there. We do that sometime as a disclaimer, but I feel really good that Bobby is a solid number 3, which is going to lead us to number 2, and that is Mino Delenko, Dean Malenko. Mean Delenko, the man of 1,000 holds, man. I can't say enough good things about Dean Malenko. I know he was Wrestler of the Year in 1997, but what people don't understand, he had been in the wrestling business for like 18 years before he got a big break. He was a big star in Japan. You know, he started my training after about 4 or 5 months into my training. Dean kind of took over. We become friends. We're close in age, give or take a couple of years. And I always say it, give or take, because I don't want to stooge him out that I might be. I'm a little bit younger. Anyway, Dean's done stuff for WWF back in the day, like refereeing when it comes to Tampa some. He done a lot of different things for NWA, stuff that was off TV, and I asked him about it because I wasn't smart enough to the business back. I'm like, you know, hey, why aren't you on that show? Why are you refereeing? You know, but it's a paycheck, and I understood that. But he said because, you know, he can't go on TV, and he was making killer money back in the day, him and his brother over in Japan. He said, I can't go on TV and get beat here and expect to keep my contracts in Japan. So even though he had some good connections with those companies because they knew who he was, he couldn't just go on TV and wrestle and get beat, but he could, you know, work some independent dates for him as an independent contractor and do, you know, some refereeing or maybe book some guys that do TV jobs and that type of thing. So Dean always had his finger in the pot, if you will, stirring a little bit, keeping the interest out there. But with that said, Dean, to me, I said it, I was in Australia, and I looked at the referee, and Dean was in the ring wrestling with another referee, obviously, in wrestling, Chris Benoit, I think it was.
Yeah.
I just looked at Frankie Reyes, who was from Florida. He's a Malenko guy. He was good friends with Larry, a little bit older than Dean and myself. And I looked at Frankie, and I said, man, my God, is Dean Malenko the most underrated wrestler in the world right now or what? And Frankie said, man, Bobby, I've said it for years. And this was 93. And Dean, to me, there's nothing he could or could not do in the ring. He was, I'll say this about him, and I'm going to say it about someone else in just a minute, and that is this. If Dean Malenko's personality, because I'm going to let you finish up, Dean, otherwise I'll ramble on too long about Dean.
Sure.
If Dean's personality, because he had a great body, Dean had that fucking tendon ligament strength too, by the way. He was a shooter, and he did some different stuff. I mean, he could work. But Dean had a good body, and Dean could work. But if Dean's personality, that held him back a little bit, because of the personality that you saw in the back, off camera, riding around with, at a Hooters or at a restaurant, or just on a bus with, Dean would just bust your gut with just funny, smart witticisms, very educated, very worldly. And man, if he could have portrayed that on the TV with his interviews and stuff, It's hard to tell what he would have been able to do, especially once they got to WWE up there, WWF, whatever the fuck. And I always say that. But anyway, my point is, if he could have conveyed that off camera, his real personality onto camera, it's unreal. But even though he was Wrestler of the Year in 97 and world traveled, worldwide famous and all that, I still think Dean Malenko is one of the most underrated professional wrestlers of all time, and I'll shut up.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, for my money, he is the greatest technical wrestler to have ever appeared on television. I could watch that guy. Look, back in the 90s, I said him and one other guy said they are the future of pro wrestling. You know, neither one turned out to be true. I think the problem was, like, and you've told me before, like, if you talk to Dean Malenko, you've told me he's the funniest son of a bitch in the room. He's got a cutting wit. He can turn a phrase. I think the problem was you put a mic in front of him and it didn't come across.
No.
I think it's just one of those things. It didn't carry well. I think Dean Malenko is a fucking major talent. I think he is one of the most overlooked person easily. Like we said before, he could be my number one on this list easily. Yeah. And when they got him to the WWE, they just didn't know what the fuck to do with him there either. So it was just one of those things that, you know what he is? He's the perfect Gaijin wrestler in Japan.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to talk. All he's got to do is whip your ass. Yeah, that's really, yeah. All right. Well, Bobby, we're going to run about a minute or two over here, but let's move on to number one, Brad Armstrong.
Right on, Brad Armstrong. Nothing but respect for Brad, and Dean or Bobby Eaton could have been up here, but we decided to go with Brad as our number one, and Brad was just a phenomenal worker. I mean, in the ring, that guy, he had a great fucking physique. You know, he had a good interview. It was a little bit southern, but it was okay for regional wrestling. Let me just say this, as continuing on as we did with Dean, not to take anything away from Brad. Brad was one of the most funniest, wittiest guys outside the fucking ring you'd ever want to be around, happy-go-lucky. And he just couldn't convey that on the TV when it come time for interviews. So Brad, but as far as work goes, man, I said it before, I saw him and Flair, you know, wrestle at a damn, worldwide taping, the least watched TV program out there. You do 3 months at a time. He went, you know, they went about 10-minute match in front of about 300 people, because that's all the Universal Studios held for those tapings. And they worked like they was in front of 10,000 fucking people at a Mania or something. It's him and Flair. And Brad was just one of those guys, man, great body, great fucking worker, great fucking guy. Just always underrated in my opinion. I'm going to shut up and let you say a thing or two. And then I've got one more thing to say about Brad. Then we'll get ready to get off this podcast. But coming in for number one, per Jeremy and myself, is Brad Armstrong. So go ahead, Jeremy. And
Brad Armstrong is from a wrestling legacy family. He's from a dynasty, Bullet Bob. Just so many members of that family are integral to wrestling. I think Brad is a victim of timing, but in a different way. Like if Brad Armstrong had been around in the 70s, like he was in the 80s and 90s, I think he would have been a major star with a number more of title wins, and probably could have toured. He could have toured the South, all over the South and the mid-Atlantic without a problem. He would have been a fucking star if he had just been around 10 years before. Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, he was around during the Jim Herd days, you know, fucking dress him up like the Candyman and fucking Spider-Man. And here's the thing. You could tell just because Brad Armstrong kept doing it, it's more than just getting a paycheck. He was there for the fucking business as well as the paycheck. Yeah. He is somebody from a wrestling family. He wanted to do for wrestling what wrestling had done for his family, I'm sure. He had a great look. He's a great worker. He was skilled. He was fast. It's just unfortunate that he was there in the time that he was. He is so underrated. Yeah. I would say overall the Armstrong family is underrated as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I still talk to Scott, sometimes through Twitter, and also Brian. I think both of them are producers now with the WWE. Don't hear too much from Steve. I haven't heard anything from him for a while. Of course, Bullets, the father, they was always such a good family to me, always so kind to me. I used to be the Armstrong brothers family driver sometimes. We all used to go out and have a good time every once in a while, and thank goodness we all outgrew that and got our shit together. I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to talk out of school. But with that said, you know, every time it seemed like Brad would just starting to get a push on something, like you said, it's just all timing. Sometimes we talked about Arachnoman last week. It's like one of those things, and you can go back and listen to that podcast. All of them are out there. We always post them up on Twitter at the Bell to Bell with Bobby, or Bell to Bell Blaze podcast on Twitter, or go to the Geekish Cast or Bobby Blaze 744 on Twitter, and we repost some of those old episodes. And last week's episode, we talked about Arachnoman. It's one of the, sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's a gimmick, but the thing about Brad was, no matter what it was, he was going to work it to the best of his ability. And he just loved the wrestling business and had all that talent, had that look and stuff. But just sometimes you're just a victim of circumstance, like you mentioned, hurt or whatever. Sometimes things come in and just, one of the last things I remember he'd done there, they put a wig on him and he was Buzzkill or something to try to do a Road Dogg gimmick. Well, he wasn't Road Dogg. You know, he wasn't some hippie out there with a black wig. I remember Medusa did the German suplex on him in a ring and the damn wig rolled off. You know, after 3, Brad rolled off and put it on. I don't know if you recall that, but it's out there. And that's the thing is he's just there, but he needed to be Brad, you know?
Yep.
And he was just underrated. One of the true talents in this professional wrestling business was Brad Armstrong. And so if you don't care, Jeremy, I'm just going to go down through 10 through 1 real quickly with Brad Armstrong coming in at number 1. This was episode 18 of the Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze podcast, the most underrated wrestlers of all time. We had number 10, Mike Awesome, followed by Dustin Rhodes. Number 8 was the late, great Buddy Landell. Number 7 was Sean Waltman. Number 6, fantastic Bobby Fulton. Coming in at number 5 was Big BW back there, Barry Windham. Number 4, Sir William Regal. Number 3, the beautiful one, beautiful Bobby Eaton. Number 2, Dean the Machine, Mino Delenko, Dean Malenko. And coming in number 1 was Brad Armstrong. So I hope you liked our list this week. Jeremy, I'm going to let you take us out of here, brother, unless you have anything else to say.
Nope, I'm good. It was a fantastic list. I feel really good about this episode,
Yep.
and we're more or less on time, so
Yep.
I don't want to run on at the mouth. So, Bobby, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure as always.
My pleasure.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We do appreciate you taking the time to listen to us, one of the most underrated wrestling podcasts on the planet. So, for Sir Robert of Smedley, Bobby Blaze, I am Lord Jeremy Vilmur.
How dare you get me to pop at the end of an episode? How dare you?
Bye-bye, everybody.